Afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Money Matters TV. My name is Dan White, and I'm the host of your show today. I'm also the president and CEO of Daniel A. White and Associates. We are a retirement planning firm headquartered in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania, and we have branch offices down in Middletown, Delaware, and we just opened a third office down in Lewis, in the Lewis Rehoboth Beach, Delaware area. And we work primarily with people that are 60 and over and trying to help them plan their income and how to position their assets for the last third of their life. So the questions that I've been getting recently, it's been a very interesting, obviously 6 months since the new administration took over. And, we know what happened April 2nd. We had Liberation Day where President Trump threatened tariffs on just about the entire world, and the market did not react kindly to that. The market took about a 20% drop in about a week. It reminded me, it was very reminiscent of the COVID crash back in 2020 when the market fell 30% in a month. This time we had about a 20% drop in about 2 weeks. So very similar, and also very similar, it has rebounded. We are almost back to an all-time high. We're within spitting distance, 1 or 2% of the all-time high. So all is well. And the question that I've been getting is this rally really sustainable? And, I wish I had an answer. The answer is we don't know. I mean, the 90-day pause is set to expire July the 2nd. So, rumors are coming out that we've struck a trade deal with China. Whether that's true or not, whether they're going to sign anything, I don't know. That's one country. We still have to get trade deals. I mean, the only one we've really signed so far is with England. So is the rally sustainable? We haven't really seen any downside to the tariffs. The inflation numbers came in today. They were relatively calm. So again, we don't know. We don't know whether trade deals are going to be struck, whether their pause ends in July and we slap tariffs on countries. It's going to be another 20 or so days to see what really happens here. The next question we get is the Fed going to cut interest rates? They came into the government wants rates cut. The debt is just spiraling out of control. And President Trump really wants Chairman Powell to cut interest rates. But Powell is saying, hey, we're not going to take orders from the president. We're independent, and we're looking at the job market and we're looking at inflation. And when you look at that, they're really between a rock and a hard place because unemployment is ticking higher. We know that. So unemployment is going up. That says the job market is weakening. They want to cut rates. So a lot was dependent upon the inflation numbers. They came in pretty good. But if they cut rates, inflation could run out of control. If they keep rates the same, we might go into a recession. So, like I said, the Fed is at this point between a rock and a hard place. And then when does the debt become an issue? I was on a webinar recently, and they said in 2028, the country, because of the Medicare, Social Security, we're going to be spending $9 trillion a year. We only bring in 5. And when does that become an issue? I mean, it's not sustainable. So these are things that the public is dealing with, we're dealing with, and I wish I could provide greater clarity to these questions, but I think we're just kind of in a wait and see mode to see where this economy goes. So that's kind of a market update from our end of things. And now I'm happy to bring on Doug Bloom from DAB Ventures. Doug is our co-host today. We're going to be talking a little bit with Doug before we bring on our guest. Doug, thanks for being on the show today.
Dan, thanks you for hosting the show, and thanks for allowing me to be your guest.
Yes. And why don't you start just by telling us a little bit about what you do, Doug?
My firm is DAB Ventures. I'm an independent business advisor. I'm the Pinnacle Business Guide. That's a community of guides across the country that work with small to medium-sized businesses to focus on executing a better execution in the clients. We focus on clarity of mission, clarity of culture, roles, responsibilities, accountabilities, KPIs, and profitability. There's a lot of different ways we can work with a client. My goal is to help business owners create space for themselves so they can be more strategic. As businesses grow through the different scales or stages of business, from business instantiation to repeatability to sustainability to scale. There's different roles and different themes that dominate, and we sort through that. We sort through challenges, and we help businesses grow.
That's certainly an area where people do need help, and probably myself included. But I guess when you're looking, and this dovetails into my intro about the economy and where we're heading, what things should CEOs and their team be considering if, like I said, we might be concerned about an economic slowdown in the near future?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question, because recessions don't just send out a Zoom invite to let you know they've arrived. So we've got to be proactive. And there's research out of Bain Consulting, published in the HBR, Harvard Business Review, that talks about companies that are prescriptive, it's going to be proactive, entering recessions, come out much stronger. So the goal is then to be proactive, to try to understand where you're exposed and what opportunities might be available. Don't delay making structural changes, but to think about it as something that could happen, and not think of it as something bad. Think of it as something that's just happening. How are you going to adjust?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because like you said, recessions. We usually don't even know we're in a recession until after it has passed. I mean, the Fed doesn't tell us, oh, by the way, we were in a recession last year. But I guess, when you're talking about that, and the other question, how do CEOs even plan for these types of things? They don't know what their costs are going to be with the tariffs. They don't know. These are all things that CEOs are wrestling with today. So you're talking about how they can plan for this. What does that actually look like in practice?
Good teams or good companies will actually pull the senior team in, and they'll actually go through and assess the company across a variety of parameters. It could be cash flow, cash management, leadership, customer concentrations in specific areas, and they'll decide, if the business slows down by 20%, what do we do? The business slows down by 30%, what do we do? But they look at it from a structural standpoint and assess where are they weak, and devise plans how to actually move forward. And that can look like setting 90-day goals, picking really a good strategy would be to do the assessment and then identify 3 core areas that you need to improve on, and set 90-day goals, assign responsibility, and have weekly check-ins to make sure progress is being made.
I'm sure you're probably quite busy. I mean, like I said, because there's so much uncertainty out there today with what the federal government is doing, and I know everybody, like the big companies are, how can we give you even any guidance on where we see profits and all to be? We don't even know what our costs of doing business are going to be. So if you're consulting with a company such as this, and you're talking about how they can plan, what actual actions do you think would give them the biggest bang for their buck at this point?
I think it's that concept of identifying the 3 areas that they really are most at risk at, and also that might be a couple areas where they are at risk and one opportunity that they see. There's a lot of companies that came through the COVID crisis much better. In fact, the companies that go into a recession with a plan and having done their homework exit with greater market shares and faster growth, and they continue. That continues on through the changing and improving economy on the other side of the recession. So it's about doing the honest work with your team to say, where are we at risk? What opportunities exist? What customers do we want to keep? What customers do we want to lose? Raise your prices. Most people think in a recession you should lower your prices, but raise your prices, because the inelastic customers are going to stay with you. The elastic customers are going to leave you anyway. But to do some smart things, have a plan, have an active conversation, don't fight it, work with it, and the opportunities will show themselves as you get deeper into it.
Yeah, it kind of sounds similar to what we do with our clients on an individual basis. We kind of try to stress test, if you will, their retirement program and say, hey, if worse things happen, are you going to be okay? So I think that's kind of similar to what you're saying is, hey, we got to prepare for this, and and batten down the hatches and make sure we're going to come out on the other side.
Yeah, and good ideas, whether it's in planning an individual's retirement plan or whether it's a corporate strategy to carry your business for the next 2 to 3 years. Good ideas are good ideas. Good strategies are good strategies. But I think it's Eisenhower who's attributed with the quote saying, "Plans are useless, but planning is everything." And I think that's the overriding concept here is that look at it, embrace it, brainstorm it, use your entire team. Don't just sit as a leader of the company sitting in the office by themselves, sweating it all. Engage your team, build confidence, build some momentum, get some things done.
It's kind of what we tell people, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. It's kind of the mantra here. Well, we do have a question from one of our listeners. John Marshall in Philadelphia wants to know, how have you dealt with changes in the business world, for example, artificial intelligence?
Well, John, thanks for the question. The answer is not going to be much different than what we just talked about. And once again, you have to look at the technology and you have to get into a brainstorming approach and a discovery approach. Once again, it's about embracing change, not fighting change. So it's, how is this change great? How does it put us more at risk? And make sure that you plug those holes. And then what opportunities does this present? I have a client that's in the business services space, and the goal for the next quarter is to develop an AI-related plan to identify inefficiencies and accuracies, people underwater in the organization, to figure out if and how AI can facilitate change in the way they do their business to make it more efficient and make it more accurate. That's the way everybody's got to think about something like that. This can help me, not that it can kill me, and work with it and work through it.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I think people have to embrace change rather than kind of being scared of it, and see how they can use it to their advantage. And, if any of the listeners out there have a question, here's how you can send in your questions to Money Matters.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, "Send us your questions." While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, MONEY, -matters, MATTERS, TV.com.
And now I'm proud to say that we have a guest on our show today. We're proud to bring Erin Snyder on the program. Erin is a forum leader and seminar leader with landmarkworldwide.com. Her business division, Vanto Group, was recently named one of America's best management consulting firms by Forbes in 2025 for the fourth consecutive year. And Erin brings both practical and transformational tools to help people shift from financial stress to empowerment. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. Great to be here.
How's things down there in Fort Lauderdale?
I think it's a lot warmer than they probably are up in New Jersey or Philadelphia or anywhere else.
Yeah, we're having a little bit of warm weather, but before we get started, why don't you just tell people a little bit about what you do, Erin?
Yeah, so what we do is we lead transformational seminars that really do empower people to create breakthroughs in their life. And we're not so content driven. A lot of people are doing a lot of listen to a podcast, read a book, get more information about how to be more effective. We engage in a powerful conversation to look into the context with which people are living their life, which could be a little bit complicated. But if you really look, there's a relationship that you and I have to money, that it's never just a transaction about money. There's a who you're being about money that's there, that influences, how you relate to money and the moves that you make with money. It's the same with every other domain in life. So we really specialize in giving people power, freedom, and peace of mind in the areas of life that are most important to them.
Well, how does someone's relationship with money affect their career, their family, and even sometimes their health?
Well, if you look at people's relationship to money, it's not just isolated in this one domain. Like, okay, I have this amount of money in my savings, I've got these investments. No, there is a whole roller coaster ride that comes with people's relationship to money. And their stance with money reflects and shapes how they relate to career, how they relate to relationships, even their own health, especially when they're stuck in old patterns or conversations. And most people are stuck in old patterns and conversations based on their upbringing about money, based on what they should be doing about money. Your money mindset really does show up everywhere. If you've got avoidance and fear about money, that often mirrors the dynamics in your work, your relationships, even your physical well-being. So some people, even successful people have a great deal of money, but they have no freedom. And there's some people who don't have a great deal of money, but they experience freedom around money. And that can show up in different ways for people, either not spending money in certain areas. When they do have it, they'll, hoard it, or they'll feel like money's a burden or a concern. So worrying about that creates stress, which shows up in your physical health. It can impact relationships. In fact, there's some staggering statistics that all of the divorces, more than 83% of them, are actually to do with money matters. So you can imagine the most important person that you say is in your life, that relationship can get destroyed over people's relationship to money.
Right. So you and Doug, I think you had a question there.
Yeah, I think you talked about avoiding money. You talked about being more powerful with money. How does that manifest? I mean, how does somebody actively avoid money? What are the symptoms? What are we looking at? What are the behaviors, one way or another, that you guys work through?
Yeah. So if you look at, I can share from my own life. I grew up in a family. My father is a very successful attorney. My mom, a stay-at-home mom, which my father's job afforded that. But I remember growing up in the family dynamic based on what they inherited generationally was, if you don't have money, you spend it to feel more secure. If you do have money, you hoard it because you don't know when it could go. And what that ended up manifesting as is my mother would take me on these shopping sprees when we didn't have money and then hide the clothes in the car. And then my father would come home, not know what happened. She wouldn't tell him. And often the next day, she'd feel so guilty. She would take all the clothes back. So I learned a lot of very disempowering dynamics from my own parents' relationship to money and what they inherited. World War II really screwed people up in terms of their relationship to money. The Great Depression. And then that gets passed down through generations of lineage. There's so much we've taken on from our past history with money that's naturally, normally influencing the way we relate to money and our dynamics with money.
That's interesting.
So I just need to understand, or maybe it helps the viewers understand. How did you end up doing this work?
The work that I presently do.
Yeah, how'd you end up in this role?
Yeah, actually, I did what is our flagship course called the Landmark Forum back in 2005, just coming out of the Air Force. I had been in the Air Force right after 9/11 and had a particularly stressful career, came out of there with a boatload of baggage. And my aunt recommended that I participate in the forum, said it saved her marriage. And I didn't know what the heck it was, but I ended up participating, and that 3-day transformational experience just altered the very nature of my life. I went from being somebody who had a whole lot of past-based conversations that were determining my experience of life. Nothing was ever perfect enough, total top performer, but never satisfied. The kind of control and grip regarding money, my health, everywhere else, just released. And after that, I literally became a new kind of human being for myself. and everything transformed in my life. Money, caca, I'm going to call it caca, disappeared over the next 6 to 9 months. I got in the driver's seat of my financial future, my health. I dropped about 80 pounds. I became somebody for myself that I wasn't the same. So I started leading our coursework, and particularly in the Money Matters, we found that it makes such a profound difference when people can examine and adapt to what's actually there in the condition they are around money, whatever they grew up in, whatever their past failures have been. It all shapes and influences. And when you can get that complete, then you can really be in the driver's seat of directing your future.
So how much does self-acceptance play into the work you do?
Oh, I mean, it's huge, because mostly every place we lack power in life is because we're not able to be accepting of what actually is so. So we are very much in the domain of fact-based. What is it to be able to have a powerful relationship to the facts without everything else that usually gets embroiled? So, you and I have interpretations of life, and we don't get stuck with life. We get stuck in the interpretations we have about life because we're relating to them as if that is the truth. And that's where you and I have very disempowering conversations, whether it's with money, your relationships, anywhere else in life. It's not from what's actually happening that you get disempowered. It's from what you're interpreting from what's happening that's impacting your experience and your power and freedom to be able to deal with what's in fact happening.
Yeah, I find that really interesting, Erin, because one of the questions, we're in the retirement planning space, and one of the questions we ask prospects and clients when they come in is, what is your earliest memory about learning about money? And everybody inevitably says, oh, that's an interesting question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. And what we find is, if they grew up with Depression era parents, that shapes how they think about money. If their parents were not good with money, that shapes how they think about money. It really is enlightening. But why do you believe past experiences need to be completed in order to have freedom? And how can people stop avoiding money, start using it to their benefit, whether they're in debt and struggling or no matter where they are in life?
Yeah. Unresolved experiences completely limit what's possible. You're being defined by something that's from your past that you didn't even have anything to do with putting together. So completion isn't about forgetting the past. It's freeing yourself from the grip of it in the present. So unresolved past experiences regarding money dictate your present choices in life. And completion allows for creation versus what people normally do is reacting. So when you can shift the conversation from scarcity, shame, which is often how people relate to money, to possibility, begins by becoming aware, distinguishing the limiting contexts that are actually there for you regarding money. So what is your relationship to money based on your upbringing? What were the kind of automatic dialogues that your parents had about money that you've taken on? And it starts by just looking, naming those automatic thoughts, naming the emotional patterns with money is the first step to really reclaiming your power.
So just want to kind of ask a side question. What's the work look like? And then on top of that, what's one small step that people can do to shift the way that they think about money or help themselves get out of this fear-driven or shame-driven context that you're talking about?
Yeah, one of the things that we engage in very simple, practical methods. So one very simple one we call the vicious circle. People have a vicious circle in relationship to money. And they think what happened in life, you can each look into this. There's what happened from your past that you still notice is impacting you right now today. And if people look into that, you'll see you still have the experience of being impacted by something that may have been 20, 30 years ago. Even though it was so far long ago, you still experience being impacted. People think the reason is because of what happened. But it's not, in fact, what happened, but rather What happened got transferred to a story about what happened and your interpretation of what happened. So for instance, your dad had a failure in business. You make a decision, I can never be successful because my dad wasn't a success in business. Or you failed with your finances. Okay, see, I'm no good with finances, becomes the interpretation. People start living as if that interpretation was what happened. And when you can get the two uncollapsed, there's a huge freedom to be able to have your past that doesn't have you. So one of the simple things that we recommend people do is simply observing, distinguishing your automatic thoughts, your conversations about money. Maybe you interview your spouse or your family about money. You know, what was their relationship with money growing up? What were the conversations in their family about money? When you start to open that up, you start to examine it, you start to bring wonder to that, all of a sudden you can start to see those recurring dialogues that are disempowering, that opens up a whole new freedom to be able to address what actually is the facts, distinct from your opinions or your past behavior.
It's almost like you have to play part psychologist and dig into what has happened in the past so they can break free and have a different future.
Yeah, it's a little bit distinct because what we engage with is ontology, the domain of being. And it's distinct from psychology, but Dan, both domains are powerful and when brought together, potent in terms of people transforming their relationship to money.
Yeah, you see a lot of people, we see it in our business as well, that if somebody, let's say they were in the market in 08, you know, when the market had a 57% drop, they're never going near it again. And look at what they missed out on in the past 15 years, a massive bull market. But because they got scared off, they don't want to deal with it.
Erin, how does ontology differ from a mindfulness, or are they the same kind of concepts?
Well, a lot of the mindfulness that's out there is very useful, valuable, but it focuses on practices. We're less focused on practices. In the domain of ontology, it's to study the domain of being. But what we're interested in is a contextual shift that gives new light to the content. So if I were to say this, right now I'm holding up a finger, and if I were to say direction, that's going to shape the way this finger shows up for you. You would automatically say up. Or if I said number, you'd say 1. See, we're not interested in the content. We're interested in the context with which the content is arising. And when you can have a shift in context, then the content takes new light. That's a new possibility for being in life that then alters the relationship to the content of your life in a way where you have power.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we're just about running out of time here, guys. So I want to thank Erin for bringing her expertise to the program today. And Doug, thank you for co-hosting. And next week, we're going to have a guest, Andrew Cohen from Halmos. Halmos Capital will be the guest on the next program. So we're going to wrap it up today, and we want to thank everybody for viewing. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Money Matters, and we will see you again next week.